Here with NewTek Lures and Bo James. We just got done watching a video posted on the Bass College about our jigs and the way they stand upright. And that is correct, they do stand upright. And just for a little demonstration, if any of you guys have a naked head, I thought I'd have Bo just reach into this box right here and grab a few jigs. And throw those on the ground, Bo, and let's see what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One didn't stand up. What is your problem? There he is. 7 out of 8 jigs landed head up. I mean, that's just what happens. Pick a jig up for a second, Bo. And as this kid was showing what happens in a bass's mouth, let's go a little further with that. Show the life, like in the way when a bass has it clamped down, and what if he was to just ease up a little? Show what happens and how lifelike that feels.
Stands up, just like that. Because you've got pressure on the line, so the instant he releases pressure on it, it tries to stand up in his mouth, so it's moving, and they just clamp back down on it because they think it's alive. Yeah, that's something that most people don't know or think about, but I've experienced it for eons, since clear back in the early 80s with this thing. And it's, you know, there's more technology to this thing than what you think. And the thing that makes this head stand up, it's in this head design. I'm not even going to get into it because it's pretty complicated, but it's part of physics and
weight distribution.
And weight distribution.
Yeah.
And
which we won't talk about.
Yeah.
Okay.
And anyway, so the actual focal point of the weight in this jig's all concentrated right here in one point. And that's the reason that it...
when you drop it, it stands straight up. Oh, I'm stuck on jigs.
So when you're dragging across the bottom, this guy's that's all in love with football jigs, this comes through rocks 10 times better than a football jig ever thought about, because it always stays upright, and then the cams and the bottom of the head and the guide arms work in conjunction with one another, and it just rolls around, slides up and over, and it keeps it from tending to wedge into cracks because of that.
Now, one of the things we enjoy about this job is watching people go through the growth process of discovering all the magic in this jig.
Oh yeah.
And talk, you know, even at Bass College, these guys are just wonderful. But they think, oh, you know, that's pretty good for brush, probably got some rock application too, but I don't know about that vegetation.
Mm-hmm.
And we always get a kick out of that.
Yeah.
Because we know people that fish it in vegetation, and they say it's better than any fish in vegetation.
Way back when fork was fairly new, if you remember any of you that are old enough remember anything about the lake, it used to have, I mean, really thick hydrilla. I mean, it was just a jungle. And so I went down there just to try this out in hydrilla, and heck, it just fishes through hydrilla just like nothing. Fishes through coontail moss the same way. You know, I know you have some different types of vegetation. Now, I did fish on Lake Monticello in Arkansas, and they have some type of vegetation, but it grows on pure mud bottom, so it has no root system at all. I mean, you just touch it with anything. It's even hard to fish a weightless plastic worm through it without it coming loose and wrapping around your line. It's really not the lure snagging, it's just the pressure of the line hitting it, and it pulls it loose. But as far as fishing through vegetation, it just fishes through everything. In fact, we got a guy in Louisiana that's shooting a video, and he's been fishing it through hyacinth roots. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but that's, he said, you know, he never even thought, he would never fish a jig in that. Yeah, so he just tried mine just to see, because he'd fished through everything else, and to his surprise, it came through hyacinths fairly easily.
And we always get a real kick when people get our jig. Instead of going out and saying, wow, you know, how does this thing hook? And, you know, the real magic in the jig is it's a hooking machine. That was the intent.
Yeah, the full intent of designing this thing was to make it where it hooks, so you're not missing fish that you should be catching. But the icing on the cake,
the byproduct of it.
yeah, the things that make it hook so well also makes it very, very snag proof.
So as soon as somebody goes and gets our jig, the first thing they want to do is go out and try to lose it.
Yep.
Because we make all these big claims of how snag proof it is, and they just want to go out. Boy, they're throwing in every bit of mess and junk that they can possibly find, and they cannot lose our jig, and that's just the magic of it. It's just that well built.
But the, you know, I mean, that's icing on the cake, because it allows you to fish in thicker stuff that nobody else can fish in without being hung up. And a lot of times that's where the very biggest bass are. And the other thing is when you hook the bass, it's hooked where it's going to be next to impossible to lose your fish. That's not to say once in a while you're going to get a bad hook set. You know, I don't think there's anything that's perfect. We're not perfect, but it's as close to perfect as you can make it. And you know, the more you fish this, the more you'll see your numbers of big fish that you put in the boat is going to go up dramatically.
Let me ask you this: as far as brush goes, can you think of a better jig?
Nope.
Rocks.
No.
Vegetation.
No.
Anything. Swim.
Jig. No.
It's hard to believe that there's an all-around jig for every purpose, but this is it. I mean, I just can't think of an application.
Well, I say you guys wouldn't even have any idea how many hours of work is in that thing. There's probably 5 years worth of work at that. And you know, and I was down here on Table Rock in the middle of winter when freezing temperatures at night up in the back end of Roaring River, where I had gin clear water and could watch that thing with a spotlight to see what it was doing. Then I'd come home and work on it some more, and then I'd go back the next night, because I had a regular job like everybody else, so I was working on it at night while everybody was sleeping.
And I've seen the prototypes that brought this thing. Can't even talk about the prototypes. Well, anyway, I've seen the process, and someday you need to do a museum on jigs.
Yeah.
Because I've seen from the get-go the different shapes, the different weed guards, the different directions. Oh my God, the myriad of things you went through to try, and some of them worked. You know, I've even seen a jig with an upside-down hook in it.
Yep.
I mean, there's just all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, you know, and that's kind of got an application, but the thing is because of what happens when you set the hook. You know, if you're trying to hook a bass in the bottom, there's a very small window to hook, because you know, if the hook's upside down and you're going to pull this way, of course you can see the arc that the hook point's traveling. So there's a very small arc it can ever penetrate the bass. But up here, you know, this is the target area. So the advantage of hooking a bass in the lower jaw, though, is you can bring a big bass in like a shingle, because when you have him hooked in the lower jaw, the bass's own power turns himself upside down, because it pulls his bottom jaw to the top and it screws up their equilibrium, and they can't fight, and they just come in like a shingle when you hook them in the bottom.
And a lot of people will experience that, because sometimes when the jig is hanging over a limb like this and a bass comes and hits it upside down, sometimes it'll go in inverted. It'll hook dead center, but in the bottom.
That's because of the relation of how the bass grabbed it.
Right.
So if he swam up like this, and this being his lower jaw, and here's his head, and grabbed it, and you're here and you jerk, it's naturally gonna hit the bottom jaw instead of the top.
And when you do hook a bass inverted, you get that shingle effect that Bo's talking about. I mean, I don't care how big this bass is, he's just going to roll over on his back because of his own natural force to fight it.
Yeah, and see me pull
oh
him in
yeah, and you're just gonna pull him in like nothing, and it's really cool. Another thing you might find yourself doing if you have a new jig in your hand is something that you'll always see me and Bo doing, and that's playing with the thing. We tend, if I get my hand, there's the weed guards right there, and we just tend to do this a lot. That's just kind of habit forming, pushing those weed guards down and reshaping them. And you'll get used to that, you know.
Well, you know, the reason that it's one of the reasons it's able to rotate and lock is by getting rid of the center-based weed guard. That was the main problem with standard jigs, because that single angle plane, it's just a property of physics. You have the same problem with your safety pin spinnerbaits. because when you're pulling that spinnerbait through the water, you have pressure on the head and the hook, and then your wire coming up here for your blades, you start putting pressure on it. So as you pull that through the water, you start collapsing that angle. Well, that's a property of physics. Anytime you have a single angle plane, which is what you've got with your spinnerbait and your safety pin design, as you start collapsing that angle from two sides, it becomes unstable and it will travel in a spiral. Well, your spinnerbait has the same problem. That's the reason it's so hard to get one tuned where it runs upright, because you're putting that pressure on there and it starts fighting itself over onto the side. Well, your weed guard does the same thing to your hook. No matter what you do, you can fan it out. That might make it a little more weedless, but it still originates from a single base that's on the center line of the hook. You're going to fight it over to the side every time you set the hook.
And for anybody that does like this technology that they're looking at, it's really amazing. Let's see if Bo shuts me up when I speak here. We have a lot more products coming on the market. Spinnerbait, buzzbait, crappie jig.
Everything that we fish with has hooking problems. Spinnerbaits, crappie jigs, spoons.
Yeah, I've seen redesigned jig and spoon, redesigned flutter spoons. I mean, you just have a myriad of things to bring forth. And it's just like the new jig. If you see our spoon, it's not just another spoon. Yep. If you see our spinnerbait, it's just not another spinnerbait. Buzzbait, I mean, everything has physics and design and just tremendous capability. And if you're a tournament fisherman, this is really the edge you need to help you.
Yeah, but I mean, anybody that just likes to fish, you know.
Sure, it has application all the way around.
Yeah. I mean, heck, I enjoy just going out fishing for fun. And, I mean, that's the most disgusting thing in the world, to have a big bass on and it comes off.
But when you're fishing for money.
You know, and then, you know, I've been fortunate and have, you know, been able to kind of figure out fish over the years and whatnot. And, you know, I catch well over 100 bass over 5 pounds every year. But there's guys that just get to fish occasionally and, you know, don't know all the nuances or something, and he finally gets that bass of a lifetime on, and it comes off because it's hooked poorly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's nothing. You know, the thing that really blows my mind is all these companies claim about all the money that they spend on research and development, but yet they've never thought about how their stuff hooks.
You need to get that, or it's probably the girlfriend.
Yep.
We'll let it go there. New Tech Lures, we're out. Thanks, Bass College. We appreciate the videos.
Hello.